Welcome back, folks, to Jack's Corner, where truth and reality have a seat at the table. Now, I want to start off this session by warning everyone to stop using the term socialist because it is a euphemistic term that the communists came up with simply because they had gotten such a bad name and reputation after murdering over 120 million people in the last 100 years. Communism tries to cover over its evil deeds by constantly changing the meaning of words or renaming their evil to make it look good. A lot of times it works because stupid people outnumber smart ones. But once communism takes over, it is the stupid people that usually get killed off first. Now let's get specific. With the advent of Andy Burnham becoming the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, that pretty much hammers the last nail in England's coffin. Andy Burnham calls himself a socialist, but he is a radical Soviet-style communist, and he has even said he wants to usher in Soviet reforms to wipe out the reforms that the former Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher put into place that brought democracy and capitalism back to the UK. Margaret Thatcher has gone down in history as one of the greatest prime ministers in the country's history, and it is a very, very sad day to see how England has fallen. But then Orwell predicted it in his novel 1984. It was a fiction that has now become true. You know, I love my British heritage and roots and have been over there so many times that I could give a tour myself. But because of my podcast and speaking the truth here, I would almost likely be stopped at the Customs and Border Control and not allowed in. The only hope for England right now is Nigel Farage, who I spoke with a little over a year ago, and I told him at that time that I hoped that when he became Prime Minister, if he does, I wanted him to give me a diplomatic pass so that I could revisit the country again. But folks, here is where the blame lies in the West, and it first started with abandoning God and allowing false teachers, false prophets, and heretics to matriculate up into the ranks of the faith. As I have said many times, there will be many clerical collars in hell. They are the spawn of the devil himself. With the pandemic of atheism in Europe came the spread of liberalism and the left. And again, when you hear me use the terms as the left, liberal, progressive, or socialist, it's all the same thing. It's all the same animal. It's communism, where the citizens become, once again, the slaves and their God becomes government. Secondarily, as a cause, the so-called Conservative Party of England had its own pandemic of cowards more interested in making a career of their position than they were in serving the people and protecting their country. They eventually stood for nothing and accepted everything, opening the door wide for the communists in the Labour Party to march right in and take over, which they did. Shame on the Conservatives. They should be swinging from the trees right next to the heretics wearing the clerical collars. Thirdly, as birds of a feather flock together, so do totalitarians and authoritarians, which are just other descriptors of communists, who have a kinship with Islam and Muslims. After all, Islam is not a religion, but rather an ideology, a tyrannical form of government. So why would the left be so in love with Islam and flood Europe with Muslims? Well, it's very simple, folks. They are cut of the same cloth. They do not believe in Western freedoms because such freedoms prevent them from the corruption they desire to impose upon the voters. What is so sad is that the citizenry, that is the indigenous people of England, have become so beaten down and mollified that they can't muster up the courage or the outrage to revolt and throw out the forces that are killing them. As Elon Musk said, civil war is inevitable in England. However, the only thing that makes me doubt that is the psychological state of the English people right now. It is almost like a Stockholm syndrome or a battered wife syndrome. True, they brought it on themselves with the first step that I mentioned, but now they are being ruled by 6 million Muslims in a country of 66 million. That's the tail wagging the dog. This is all part of what is called the fourth jihad, or bringing about the 12th imam. It has been known for ages that it only takes about 3% of a population to sway the rest, and the 3% rule is definitely coming into play here. The communists love the Muslims because they know it to be a totalitarian movement and form of government, not a religion. But they are okay with it being called a religion because they can get a lot of people to do monstrous and murderous things because they're doing it in the name of their so-called God. What most of these people don't understand is that they are being forced to worship a government as God. The Muslims have a name for their God, and it's called Islam. And they commit all sorts of atrocities as long as it is in the name of a fake religion and God. And they do. So why is this so important for America? Well, that's because these enclaves and nations within a nation are being set up by Muslims in this country. And for instance, in Michigan and Wisconsin and Texas and other parts where very soon this small minority will be the tail that, like I said, wags the dog. It will become the 3% or part of what is known as the 3% rule. So don't be fooled, folks. You must support politicians and support deporting the Muslims that will not assimilate. See, they set up their own little enclaves. They don't want to be a part of this country. They push for Sharia law and continue to support Islamic terrorist groups. Do not allow this small 3% to rule this country. You must grow a backbone, and you must be tough. You must become intolerant, and you must care less about what liberals, progressives, and Democrats think and say about you. That should be your war cry and a call to action. Communism, socialism, liberalism, and Islam are all kissing cousins born of hell and a threat to your life, liberty, and happiness. If it were a race, then racism would be in order. Stop this disease now and prevent a Civil War 2.0 from occurring. Now, in my previous podcast, I've given you the action plan, and it is simple. Bud Light the media, the corporations, and the Democrat Party. Let's throw in the libertarians as well while we're at it. During the World Cup, you saw many interviews of those from Europe and England, and they said they had been lied to by their media and their governments about America. They fell in love with America and didn't want to leave. They loved our freedoms, and you could tell that they were heartbroken that they had to leave and go back. And I was heartbroken for them too. So in order to wrap up this segment, you will have the first opportunity to put into action the steps that are necessary to defeat this enemy, and that will be in November with the midterm elections. Do not vote for any Democrat, whether they are running for dog catcher, school board, city council, or senator. They all support an evil agenda. They all pray from the same prayer book. So your first opportunity is just around the corner. Don't miss it. It's time to be what I call aggressively intolerant. Remember that. Let it sink in. You have to start being aggressively intolerant. Now, the following is a dialogue from Moderate Case, along with some of my thoughts mixed in. You know, there comes a point in history where politics can't save the nation because the sickness isn't political, it's moral. It's spiritual, and I believe in America we've reached that point. America currently is a nation at war with its own soul. We shout about freedom while killing what made us free. We preach tolerance, but show none for truth. We demand justice, but in my opinion, we mock the author of justice. We don't deserve what we have. This isn't just a political divide, it's a moral fracture. We've broken the foundation that once held together faith, family, duty, and humility. Reverence for God has been traded for something hollow, self-worship, and when man becomes his own God, the world will slowly begin to burn, and that's where Elijah's creed begins, because Elijah wasn't a politician. He wasn't a warrior. He was a man who stood alone in his time of decay when Israel had bowed to Baal, when the people had traded the living God for golden idols and lies. Now, Elijah didn't win any popularity contest. He didn't flatter any king. He stood before them and trembled, but truthfully he said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal, then follow him." And that's the question that America faces now. How long do we have to keep pretending that morality is purely subjective? How long will we twist the truth into whatever suits our desires? How long will we pretend that God is a myth while worshiping ourselves instead? We are living in the age of modern Baal, the idols of self-status, politics, and pleasure. We no longer need stone statues. We need screens, celebrities, ideologies, and we call all that progress. But to me, it's no different than paganism. We've lost what makes life sacred. We abort children and call it choice. We destroy families and call it freedom. We redefine reality and we call it compassion, love, and care. But when a nation removes God from its heart, it begins to hollow out from the inside, and you cannot legislate meaning. You cannot vote truth back into existence after the culture has rejected its creator. People can claim they don't worship anything, but they do. The truth is that a nation without God doesn't mean that the nation is not religious. Religion does not require God. You can worship things aside from a God, and when a culture rejects its creator, it inevitably worships itself. And that is the root of America's decay, nihilism, self-worship, moral relativism. These are symptoms of a people who have forgotten where ultimately truth comes from. So Elijah's creed isn't the slogan, it is a warning. Truthfully, it is a creed for those who refuse to bow and who refuse to stay silent while our nation burns. Elijah in the Bible did not come to entertain the culture. He came to confront it and to expose the false gods and remind people truth doesn't change just because the crowd and the people who are existing does. This is your moment to confront. This is your moment to show what you stand for and to become aggressively intolerant. Now, this should come as no surprise to anyone, but Adam Hamilton, a frontrunner in the Kansas Democrat primary race for Senate, is a Methodist pastor who believes that the Bible is full of errors. So where else would a heretic and an apostate run for office? Well, of course, the Democrat Party. As I have said so many times in the past, hell will be filled with those wearing clerical collars. I was raised in the Methodist Church, and upon learning that the organization was giving some of our tithe money to communist organizations back in the 60s and the 70s, I left the church. Since then, the gays and women in the pastorate flooded into the church, which is in direct violation of Scripture. And I thank God for hell, for without it, there would be no ultimate justice. Folks, can you think of anything normal about the Democrat Party? It's now become the party of choice. Party of choice for communists. And in fact, now communists, for the first time in our history, are holding office in Congress. We are having to fight communists on our shores after hundreds of thousands of Americans have been murdered by communists, and now they are in our churches. Please don't tell me that you couldn't see this coming. As I have said in some of my other podcasts, we are fighting more than communists, which was spawned in hell, but every deviant and depraved that you can find, particularly in the blue states, where a majority of the population is atheist. Robert Bork wrote the book Slouching Towards Gomorrah, and he was so correct, but it has gotten even worse, and we are racing towards Armageddon. Just a quick little aside here about Robert Bork. He was one of the best and brightest minds and jurists in the country and was selected for a position on the U.S. Supreme Court. But President George Herbert Walker Bush, being the weak man and patrician that he was, wouldn't fight for this nomination. And the demons in the Democrat Party caused his nomination to fail. I suppose there's another way that you could describe the difference between the Democrat and the Republican parties, and that is the Democrats are demonic and the Republicans, save for a few, are cowards. So folks, as if you needed another example of the enemy that the Democrat Party has become to your life, we have an apostate Methodist pastor running as the Democrat candidate for Senate in Kansas. And I will say once again, you can't be a Christian and be Democrat because you are lending your support to evil, and everything that the Democrat Party stands for is exactly what God hates, and you can no longer plead innocence or ignorance through that. You just can't. Ignorance no longer serves as an excuse for you. And the Bible's pretty clear on that as well. Now, in fact, that was never a get-out-of-jail-free card anyway. And it's like I said, that was scriptural. No one will have or be with an excuse on Judgment Day because you innately knew, no matter how hard you try to suppress the truth, you know. Now, let's look in Liam DeBoer's podcast, Liam Out Loud, where he gives another excellent psychoanalysis of the political problem we have. Of course, I go to the very root of the problem being the pandemic of atheism and the resulting depravity of the people, but I want to give you Liam's analysis, to which I agree, and so many others have said in different ways. In Pathocracy, that's a system in which power is seized and controlled by a small pathological minority. And that is, in today's world, that would be the psychopaths, narcissists, and Machiavellian types that we see in the leftists and communists who hide behind the term socialism. Empathy and morality are actively dismantled in favor of ruthless manipulation and deceit. They got there by false empathy, but that will change once power is seized. In this scenario, the moral man becomes the criminal. Those who resist see through all of it. But they keep their empathy and their moral clarity, and for that they are hunted and censored and scapegoated for refusing to kneel. The doctor who questioned the consensus lost his license. The professor who would not recite the creed lost his post, and others who speak out are censored. Then there are the bystanders, the confused, frightened majority who slowly absorb the regime's norms just to stay out of trouble. This is being played out in England right now. And fortunately, we in America are a little bit behind the curve, but on the same trajectory. Andrew Lobowski studied psychological disorders in politics, and he measured them. And he found that roughly 6% of the population forms the active structure of pathocracy, or pathocratic rule. So what is pathocratic rule? It is a form of government where power is seized and held by individuals with severe personality disorders, specifically psychopathy and narcissism. Now, let me give you a few examples, and we can start with Plattner in Maine, or Tallarico of Texas, who says God is non-binary, and that he said there were 6 genders. Then you have Mondami in New York, who wants to abolish private property and seize the means of production. That's communism, in case you didn't know. Then Lobowski said that another 12% adapt to serve the pathocrats, and the remaining 82%, the great mass of normal people, never accepts the system in their heart, but they learn to police themselves. This is when freedom has died. So what does that mean? They condition you so that you automatically obey the regime. A good example of this was political correctness, designed for conservatives and Republicans who rebelled against it, but all too often they complied with it anyway. That was a communist construct, political correctness was, and so many of us bought into it, but you were the intended target. So the end result is the terrorizing of thought is accomplished by society itself. We saw this with the COVID pandemic. This was planned. This trial run gave the left everything they needed. It told them that the population could be pacified, that is, suppressed, and how many of you were obedient. Think about it. How many of you were obedient to all the irrational rules and regulations that they passed to shut you down? The solace of the majority becomes the oxygen that lets the fire spread. This is the end state of paneurogenesis, which refers to the study or the origin of evil and wickedness. Truth is called dangerous. Sanity is labeled as extremism. The system rewarding the disordered and punishing the good. Call it liberalism or call it progressivism if you want. I call it Democrats because that is the label under which they all congregate. Lobowski would call it a psychological coup, and he left us one final warning. Nothing poisons the human soul more than moralizing about behavior that is pathological in origin, because the moralistic reading closes the door to real understanding until we grasp that we're fighting, and that is pathological people. That's who we're fighting, pathological people, when we finally realize it, rather than just fighting merely bad ideas. Thus, we keep surrendering ground. This was never the left versus right. It's sanity versus madness. Until sanity takes the power back, the collapse will continue to go on. Now, I want to show you a clip of one of the reasons why Congress does not work and why some people should not have the right to vote and the consequences of them voting. Listen to this arrogant, condescending, uppity, black, entitled racist in Congress. She is totally disrespectful and deserves no respect. Now listen carefully to this and how she is so condescendingly treats this fellow, this interviewee, who is Russell Vought.
Give me one reason why companies should be able to harass cancer survivors to collect more than they owe for a medical bill.
Well, they shouldn't be able to harass, and we have laws on the books but the rules that we changed were specifically...
Give me one good reason. You rescinded the rule where medical debt would not have been reported
because the statute
on credit reports.
Allow it.
Give me what? You don't have one good reason. Moving on.
Statute literally
there
said the
is
reverse.
not one good reason. You claim, you avow that you are a self-proclaimed Christian nationalist, so I'm sure you spent some time in Sunday school.
That's a pejorative.
I'm sorry, did you happen upon a scripture that said, thou shalt make their neighbor poorer, hungrier, sicker, and less safe? Because that's actually what you've done. I didn't ask you to speak. This makes no sense. You are as incompetent as you are cruel and callous.
Okay, now let me explain a little bit about Russ Vought. Here I am with Russ Vought last year at a dinner wherein he and I had a substantive talk. Russell is one of the most powerful people in the country today outside of the president. Vought, the president's director of office management and budget, spoke with regard to the major changes that are being made and implemented to undo the destruction the Biden administration did to this country. He even has become a target for assassination himself outside of the president, and it was, of course, by the radical left. He is one of the smartest men in Washington, D.C. He has more knowledge and skill in his little finger than dozens of these Presleys. She's a disgrace and an embarrassment. In the discussion I had with Russ, he advised that the changes that the Trump administration is implementing are tremendous. For example, based on the plans they have that they've put in place, we will have dropped the debt from $32 trillion to just over 18 in the next 10 years. This is just one of the solid and foundational things being done to place the country back on a solid financial footing, a footing that Biden destroyed. We have now gotten back the power to defund bastions of liberal support through their fraud and corruption that we see is being uncovered across the nation, which started by the recent disclosures in Minneapolis in Minnesota. Democrat funding packages are being rescinded. We are now seeing the financial fraud of the Democrats and how they have been supporting themselves through this fraud. They create a program for a fake cause that is not needed, and then they appoint their friends to manage, or should I say mismanage, the program, and then they siphon off billions like they did in Minnesota with the Somalis. Russ also advised that they have eliminated 129 regulations for every new regulation that's passed. That is astounding, folks, because originally they were only going to try to eliminate 6 regulations, old regulations, per new that was passed. For all of you trying to run your own businesses, this is a blessing to you. You will also be benefiting from those regulation cuts in the near future. But neither the Democrats nor the media want you to know about this. We shut down Elizabeth Warren's weaponization of EPA regulations, which she used to punish companies. We are cutting off the federal funding of the corruption in blue states. Many don't want to accept this reality because it is difficult to think that we allowed this to happen, but we are dealing with a Democrat Party that was slowly taking over, or was being taken over, by those committed to a communist ideology. They have and are using any means necessary to reach their goal of permanent control. They will destroy the country, as Russ said in his conversation with me, but he said it's a constant fight, and they are deeply entrenched, and the reason they are so extreme in what they are doing and saying with lies that are so transparent is because they know that if Trump succeeds, then that will be the end of their goal to turn the country into a socialist state. Okay, now before I close this session, I want to give you your permanent action plan from here on out. You need to become aggressively intolerant toward Democrats, media, corporations that do their bidding, and cowardly Republicans. No, not just passive intolerance. You must become aggressively intolerant. After all, that is all you have gotten from the left over the last 20 years. Oh, and one more quickie that I want to develop here, and I will develop it more fully, but because this is so recent in the news, and that is about Anthony Fauci, who after his diary was found was proven a liar and responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths in America during COVID. Biden knew he was guilty and pardoned Fauci anyway. Once pardoned, you no longer have the privilege of pleading the Fifth Amendment, but Fauci did do that illegally before Congress last week 111 times. It is illegal for him to do that, and given that he was pardoned, he is guilty as sin and should be in jail the remainder of his life. Well, with that, thank you for joining us, and until next time, I'm Jack Richardson for Jack's Corner.